Hello, everyone. My name is Vidur Apparao, and I'm CTO of Agari. Agari's mission is to build internet-scale, data-driven security solutions to eliminate email as a vector for cyber attacks, enabling businesses and consumers to interact safely. My guest today, Justin Somaini, is a one-percenter. Of course, I don't mean that in an Occupy movement, income inequality sort of way, though Box did have an IPO earlier this year. What I actually mean is that Justin is at the top tier of security leaders who know two things. One, that security is a consistently evolving practice, and done well, it doesn't just involve checking off items on a compliance list or buying from the Magic Quadrant, but requires working with new technologies, fresh approaches, and disruptive startups like my own. And second, that security isn't just a necessity, but an opportunity. It isn't just a business cost, but a business enabler, allowing companies like Box to differentiate themselves as progressive leaders in their industry. Justin started his career, as many in the security world do, in the financial space at Charles Schwab and PwC. He was the first external-facing CISO, Chief Information Security Officer at Symantec, where he developed the company's security enterprise risk management process and also spent a significant amount of his time in customer relations and industry thought leadership. He created and held the CISO role at Yahoo, driving security planning and operations for the company. He's an advisor to many security companies, including Qualys, SkyHigh, OpenDNS, SourceClear, Niara, and others. He's a frequent and insightful speaker and blogger, and you can check out his blog at somaini.net. And most importantly, he's Chief Trust Officer at Box. So please join me in welcoming Justin Somaini.
You should write all of mine. That's fantastic. I did. Thank you. I feel like somebody else should be coming up here.
So this is structured as a conversation. I'm going to kick it off by just asking, and there you go, asking Justin a few questions. But at any point, feel free to raise your hand, ask Justin questions, ask me if it strikes your fancy. So Justin, I'm going to start by asking you about you and your role at Box. Your title is Chief Trust Officer. Mm-hmm. How is that different, and how is that the same as a Chief Security Officer, a CISO?
Right, and so I think what we're trying to accomplish at Box is a little bit differently. Hello? Blinks. Can you hear me now? Ah, that's amazing. I have what we call a hog hollering voice, so I can scream out very loud if need be. No, at Box we have really an objective to really look at security very, very differently than non-security companies do, and how we really make security a product and effective differentiator in the market versus simply a defensive layer in protecting our company from attacks, malicious use, or compromise. And it's a very subtle change, but it's very significant in how it impacts the overall business from a top down. So in a security vendor, you look at security as a differentiator between company A and company B. In non-security companies, security is more of a hurdle that you need to accomplish for your customers to sell into. I need to get a certification, I need to make sure I have the certain bells and whistles in place, and then I'm going to sell to a CIO, sell to a business unit. That's where I'm going to have a product differentiation or a focus differentiation, or maybe even a cost differentiation if we go down a Michael Porter sense. Well, the concept that we have is that security is a differentiator, especially now with the conversation of security being very, very timely in the market, as well as the focus of it, not just as security practitioners, but really on the buy side, pushing down onto the CEO as well as to the board, making security not a conversation, but more than likely the conversation when it comes to purchasing products and services. And so to do that, we take a very strategic and forward-looking at the concepts of security to really effectively say it's not a hurdle, but we're really trying to solve the security problems of our customers. And to that point, we really look at how we can help mitigate their data loss problem, how we can help secure their insecure business communications, how we can help accelerate e-discovery or protect against advanced persistent threats. These are the conversations that we have internally, and that forces us to look at solutions or M&As or partnerships that customers aren't even asking for, and really creating a significant differentiation against our peers.
So does that mean you think of Box as a security company?
I do.
You do.
Absolutely. I'm a security guy, so I'm a hammer looking for a nail. So no, absolutely. I definitely see in the security space how ever since we got off the mainframes, the way we've been dealing with content is a very decentralized fashion. So placing the basic concepts of security, confidentiality, integrity, and availability to files and emails and USBs, et cetera, is very damn near impossible. And so what we have with Box or Box-type solutions is really a re-centralization of that content in a globally accessible model, allowing us to apply the basic theories of security to it in practice and extending it way beyond our borders, solving problems that we've never really been able to solve for roughly the past 40 years.
Interesting. So how does that change your day-to-day role? Are you involved in product development and marketing, all of those things?
Yeah. Much more than I ever expected. I would probably say I spend 20 to 30% of my time in the security startup partnership space, identifying new ideas in security and how they could apply to the Box platform. What are the trends, understanding the macro trends as well as the micro, dealing with marketing and crafting the message, as well as how we inject into the market in certain verticals, as well as how we drive a conversation to specific leaders in the space. I run the advisory board, the trust advisory board for Box. Product strategy, I wrote the trust strategy was very much product centric about 2 years ago, and that's really carried forth into the product management space. Strategy to roadmap, and then roadmap down is really where they take it from there. So all across the deck, horizontally, at a very different level than a typical CISO, which might be some legal, but heavy IT in implementation and defense capabilities.
Right. And do you think this security-forward approach is, today it differentiates Box from your competitors, but do you think it's going to be the standard way of operation for any company playing in the enterprise space, delivering cloud and SaaS offerings?
I hope so. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different areas that businesses need to compete on and differentiate themselves. I believe one that we've talked about, but not necessarily really done in industry, is the security conversations. And so security has been marginalized to, I passed Sarbanes-Oxley, or I passed, an ISO certification, as opposed to how do we, one, embed a philosophy of acting transparently to the customers and operationally involve them, all the way down to how do we conceive of security and drive it in as a forward-looking solution for our customers. You don't see a lot of that, but I think we're starting to, and as a result, we should have some seismic shifts in how we solve some of the problems moving forward.
Excellent, and it seems like that should occur not only in the enterprise domain, but in for consumer companies as well, given all of the data breaches and the impact to individual consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They should secure their environments as well. The part of the problem that you have in security and enterprise versus consumers are very, very difficult to adopt a secure behavior or secure solutions, considering that most of the security apparatus typically causes a bump in their behavior, a bump in the wire, and how they operate with that service. So it's very difficult to get two-factor authentication, for instance, to consumers to protect their accounts. Most of the consumer services that are out there, Google, Facebook, Yahoo, the list goes on, have massive security teams dealing with the problem, but you really need to incorporate the customer in that, and that's one of the biggest challenges that really exist in the consumer space, whereas enterprise, you establish a policy, you push it down, you really have a much stronger ability to have a heavier hand.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of that heavier hand, you mentioned that the goal of Box and the security forward approach is to really be an extension of your customer's security operations, security team. If you have customers who are in the financial industry, in heavily regulated industries, does that limit your ability to be agile because you've got to live by their rules, their restrictions, their compliance needs?
I wouldn't really say so. I think when we talk about compliance and regulatory acts, whatever the vehicle of compliance or accreditation is, it is the low bar really when we talk about security. And so between that compliance bar and being secure is the gap that you typically see security practitioners saying, how do we manage risk for a particular company? So for any vendor really getting into a space, that compliance bar that you hit, that's just table stakes.
Right.
The real question is, how far are you going to push your agility and capability well above that to meet the customer's security need, which is, I need an agile, multifaceted capability to deal with threats, employee behavior issues, et cetera, and culture for my issue to be able to manage risk. And so what we really try to do is say, this is base case, and how do we move up this chain so that we could really empower our customers with the greatest capability that they need, whether they're financial services, construction, legal, or any other vertical that might be out there, and make it flexible enough that they're in control of their confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
So build it into the product.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very much different than enterprise, where you buy a software stack and then you start bolting on a whole bunch of things. In the SaaS space, you really have a massive capability of building it in. You have a hyper focus on your customer base to do so, and you establish very strategic partners to really facilitate that security ecosystem that the customers really want.
Speaking of which, Box announced Box Trust at the end of last year, which it was effectively a network of partners that fit into the Box ecosystem. Do you think that's a model that really makes sense more broadly, even beyond the Box ecosystem?
Well, I'm a little bit biased. I wrote it, so yeah,
right.
Of course. No, I think when we look at the 40, 50 years of enterprise security, our controls or the things that we logically put in place really haven't changed. But what has changed is this migration of client server to client cloud has forced these application services away from the enterprise into third parties, and really had our customers and even non-customers come to us and say, how do I secure this cloud thing? Right. And so what we wanted to do is a couple of things. One, put forth the architecture in a abstract sense of what are the controls, what are the things that effectively needed to be done. Everybody needs to do logging and analysis. Everybody needs to do identity authentication. Everybody needs to do vulnerability management. These are just basic things that any security organization does. But the difference is that on-premise, you're able to bolt it on, you're able to jail or create an egg-type defensive mechanism to kind of compensate for applications lackings. But in a SaaS world, it's really heavily relied upon the partnership and integrations that the BD teams do. And so what we did then is saying, here's a general architecture of what you need to do, but your vendors have dramatically changed because not all of the legacy vendors have solutions that integrate with cloud providers. And not all of those solutions cover both your on-premise as well as your cloud services to be able to give you that visibility for logging and analytics, as an example, of your cloud services and your on-prem environment. So that environment of our customers has dramatically changed from here's my enterprise to, oh, it's my enterprise, and then I have my users hanging off the internet, and then I've got services hanging off the internet. I need to protect all of that, and I need to really look at solutions to help me do it.
So that presents, real opportunities for new startups coming in to be able to actually span that.
Huge. The way I describe it, and I've got to talk about security transformation, is that security industry has gone through probably 3 transformational waves, which are directly attached to the IT transformational waves that occurred to them. Security is probably maybe 6-7 years later. So we have mainframe to client server, and then, effectively we had the semantics of the world, et cetera, starting out in 99, I believe. Then we had client server to client cloud, and Salesforce, I think, was, 2001? 99 when they IPO'd, and now we're just now starting to, no, that's wrong. Not that early? Have to look.
Early 2000s.
I thought it was
Yeah.
very. Anyways,
Yeah.
so then we have the security industry now just starting, probably in the past couple of years, really driving in solutions to where those cloud providers and on-premise really is. And so it's an interesting shift in how these solutions start coming onto the market when demand, the problems, and the technology really aligns. So if it holds true, when we look forward, we have Internet of Things to kind of test that out, which technically might be too early, but now is the beginning of the stages of how we look at the problem, think about the problem, and as demand increases and the problem increases, maybe 4 or 5 years from now, we'll actually start having some acceleration of those security solutions.
So speaking of the future, you run an annual survey called the Red List, right, where you identify emerging startups in the security space. Can you tell us a little bit about that, the process that you use and your goals with that survey?
So I really have a strong opinion about certain things in my industry, as most people have a tendency to do. And we have a lot of surveys that go out that are self-fulfilling, are vehicles for maybe the sponsorship of the entity of those surveys. And really, honestly, I got really bored and I wanted to do a survey of my own. And it kind of echoed back to media and entertainment, where an individual sent out a survey of all the scripts that never got funded for that year. And he effectively force ranked, got them to be force ranked by the submittals of which are the best scripts that didn't get funded, and became a feeding frenzy for Hollywood on those higher ranking scripts. It was fascinating, very easy, very basic, very simple. And so I said, wow, wouldn't it be fun? Because I think that innovation comes out of the smaller companies. Having been in larger ones, it's very, very difficult to get innovation coming out of large companies for a lot of different reasons. And there's really no strong connection between the buy side or the practitioner and the entrepreneur, the sell side, at those early stages. So from seed to, let's just say, B round. Right. And so I said, wouldn't it be fun? I'll get a list of all of the security, B round and earlier security companies and send it out to 40,000 of my closest friends and effectively say, really just 2 questions. Have you ever heard of this company before? And 2, on a scale of, say, 1 to 3, what level of value do they add in solving that problem? And that's effectively it. And at the end, it's what companies have I not heard of? And so what has come back is actually pretty interesting. One, I am completely humbled every time I do it. I think I've mastered. I send it out to 30, 40 VCs and get a really solid list, and then there's 30 more companies that come back I've never heard of before. But what effectively does from the buy side is it force ranks the companies that are out there in regards to their level of influence or solution into that problem. But 2, you can also see from have I ever heard of them before, their go-to-market strategy at a light level. How are they injecting into the market, and are they doing effectively, and how are they competing at the go-to-market with their competitors? Right. And so, yeah, this is probably the second-ish year that I've done that. I find it very rewarding. It's just fun.
Right. And where are you in the process this year?
So I actually closed it out just Sunday, and now I'm going through the fun, arduous task of writing it up. So it's probably about a couple of weeks before I get something out the door and put on the site. Yeah.
Are there any, do you have any initial insights, previews of what's to come?
Nothing significant. I mean, a little bit more of a carryover from the last time. So OpenDNS did very, very well. Sky-high Netscope, so that whole, what I would call that network control plane from premise moving to the cloud, that has taken off. We're starting to see the SIM v2 space come in, but I think it's very early. In addition to that, the user behavior or user education, I struggle at finding a better way of calling it that, but PhishMe, which is a little company doing a very simple, basic mechanism of testing out users on do they click links, and obviously their technology is more complex from that very simplified approach, doing very, very well in it. And actually, I'm I have to take another look at them and see what they've been doing. But the feedback has been very good. And so, yeah, there are other ones as we look at that malware V2 space. So you've got CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Cylance. They're doing pretty well and growing. And then you obviously have those that are falling to the wayside. But it's that's generally what I think is in there right now.
Speaking of SimV2, and yeah, you know, I was at RSA were you, I think, and many people here last week, and it seemed like you know there was a consistent theme on the expo floor in panels around threat detection and response. And this notion, and I think it's you know it's part of the theme of the panel following us. It's not a question of you know if, but when. This notion that breaches happen, they will happen in any enterprise, and the investment focus for a security team should be on the on actually detection and response after a breach. Do you agree with that? That it's not a question of if, but when?
I agree with that premise. I think that doing security is very, very simple in concept, very complex in practice when you apply it. And any security program needs to have corrective controls and detective controls, those two things that you're talking about. But I think it's very, very dangerous when we don't also include in parity the preventative controls. But the reason why we talk about detective and corrective is because they're very sexy. You know, I mean, how often do you really hear about an auditor doing a really great job? Probably not that often, but you really hear about the firefighters running out, putting out the attacks and fires and throwing somebody in jail. I mean, it's a great story. It sells, and it's easy to see. But 80% is boring and mundane work. And so I think it's a combination that needs to be implemented and managed by the team. But what we have now in the space is we have more awareness and more involvement in the security industry than ever before. And so through FSISAC or Threat Exchange or all these nexuses and focal points of information sharing, we're now able to, an organization or a company is able to get feeds from a much, much larger corpus than ever before to really help identify their issues inside. And so as a result of that, they probably do need some technologies to help them down that path of not only ingestion, but also comparison to what they have. Now, the next level is how do you respond to it? And the way that we deal with attacks today or compromises today is very, very different than how we dealt with it 10 years ago. When Slammer came out, malware, take it off the network, fix it. Nowadays, you actually have to sit and wait for manage the environment for months even, trying to identify where all the points of entry the individual or multiple individuals have and do a takedown all at once. That takes a lot of concerted effort. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of risk management because who knows what they have. Because you don't want to shut it down too early, they will just go somewhere else because they have multiple entry points into your network. And so having capabilities to support that is very, very important.
But it sounds like there's a technology solution, but there's also a people and manual component to that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I would probably say in the skill set changes that practitioners are having, we're seeing the engineers move away as more of the corporate back office applications are moving to the cloud. We're seeing a higher demand on risk management in order to manage more of a program of security. But we're seeing a dramatic increase in that threat response expert to be able to deal with deep, deep, sophisticated issues such as incident response.
So how does a company like Box find those people? They generally go to financial companies that have armies of threat response folks,
we
right?
just post a job opening and we get massive amounts of resumes. No, I mean, it's very hard to find security individuals in the industry, absolutely. And this has been going on for probably 10, 15 years as far as I know. And so one of the things that we really tried to do is how do we establish basically a program, a rotation program, ingesting people inside the company, educate them on various aspects of security, and build them up versus expecting them to come in fully knowledge and experience into the various things. Not only do they need to learn about Box as a company and our technology and how do we approach as well as the layers of attacks that we see, but also we need to build them up on the unique technologies that we leverage, which might not be very prevalent in a lot of organizations, whether it's open source, in-house developed, or companies that we're leveraging to build our products.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say that's actually not uncommon with a lot of organizations today.
I've been hearing a lot about security for DevOps. So the idea that initially security was almost separate from IT and development for to have a separation of functions, but now it's actually almost being brought back in and into the development process. And are you seeing that as well?
Absolutely. Application security.
That's true.
Really, what we're talking about here is very important and very poorly done in a lot of places.
Right.
My philosophy personally is that we have a mental difference between security and engineering or development.
Right.
Security grew up in more of an operational mode or IT ops. So here's my standard, go off and build to that standard.
Right.
That's not how engineers think. Here's the problem, how do we cultivate a solution together and incorporate it really into their process? And so that's a different culture, that's a different way of attacking the problem. In order to deal with that, you really need to have individuals embedded into the engineering organizations, especially for high tech, as well as how do you manage that SDLC process for security involved.
That's a question.
So you mentioned that here's the standards that engineers solve for the problem, but isn't security always evolving? It's always a problem?
Not necessarily. A lot of people say that security's changing a lot. In some ways it is. But the basic problems and things that we're accounting for, identity authentication, or even at an application security level, input validation, token management, session management, they're pretty basic. When you look at the OWASP top 10, they really haven't changed over the past 7-8 years. Maybe the languages have changed. Maybe whether it's compiled versus interpretive languages, that might be a subtle difference. So there are changes in the underlying technology and security, but I would say 50, 60, 70% of the basic theories and what we need to get done really have been tried and true.
Has there not been any fundamental change in the concept of security?
In the concept, no. I mean, I would say that in 80%. I'm sure if I sat back and thought, I would say, yeah, there's subtle changes or some points of change throughout that. There's been a change in the threat landscape. About 10 years ago, it dramatically shifted for us. There's obviously been a change in the technology that we've leveraged from mainframes to what we do today. And there's been a change in the philosophy of, I would say, applied security versus more security theory, where applied security is more nowadays incorporating behavior change of employees than ever before, where technology is used to support that, not necessarily be the core control. How do we make the user or the employee the core control, educate them, get them to the right place, and then augment it with technology? Probably, for the most part, because those employees are more empowered to make decisions than ever before. And so we need to make sure that they're making the right ones where, 15 years ago, they couldn't go out and buy their own devices. They couldn't connect them to the network. They couldn't sit on the internet and do whatever they want. Today, they can. So it's much, much more important that we drive a higher focus to them and flexibility in how we drive those solutions to them. So we create a smorgasbord of capabilities depending upon what technology they decide to use versus here's the standard, you must use the standard. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So in the physical world, if I have a valuable asset, I will seek insurance for it to protect it. And when there's loss, the provider will, make good the loss, right? So I go and pick an insurance provider based on their reputation. Now in the digital world, we are putting our valuable assets in these internet properties like Box and others. I think it seems to me that in general, the digital sort of service providers do a relatively not good job when a data loss occurs. Because Anthem was an example, and I got a very brief email from the CEO of Anthem. That was it, as an example. But I think that maybe there are two questions. One is, what should be the right posture for the an experience that's maybe similar to if I had a car accident and, State Farm will help me get my car back in shape. So that's one. And the second is, do, companies like yourself and others actually provide insurance? I mean, in the State Farm example, I'm paying a premium. So you have a way of, saying I'll insure 1,000 people, maybe 10% will get a problem, so I can cover my cost. But here with Box, I don't pay anything. How do you compensate me, and how do you cover that cost?
Yeah, so we haven't seen that model in enterprise software. And just remove security out of it for a little bit. On the consumer side, I would probably say that's not going to happen anytime soon, or I haven't seen anything happen anytime soon. Obama came out with an executive order just recently in order to drive more consumer protection in a lot of spaces, but as well as like free credit reports and a bunch of other things. Identity protection is probably the most significant component of the executive order. But what we see on the enterprise side is really the beginnings of insurance packages or vehicles for companies for their environments. It's not necessarily, hey, I'm going to store content in service provider A, so I need a premium or I need a package or vehicle for that. But it's, here's my enterprise in case of loss, damage, or any sort of financial loss. I can do some sort of reclaim through an insurance vehicle. The problem that we have in there, where the desire of doing that goes back to even when I started out in the security industry about 20 years ago, we've never really had a focus, never really had a need on the buy side. That is coming into play now over the past 3 or 4 years. We do see those packages, but on the analyst side, there's a significant dearth of information. So there's no histogram signals to be able to produce, here is the right model for these particular vehicles, whether it's data center breach, data loss, and analyze the company. They're working through that now. So you see the premiums of these things very, very high and all over the place. But it is going to move forward. When you talk to insurance companies, they're very excited about it, even though it's such a micro component to the overall insurance landscape. It is a huge focus, as well as for companies like mine. We dramatically, significantly encourage it because our customers are really the important facet in all of this, and we want to make sure they're protected. We think we're doing the right thing, but we're just one spoke in your overall ecosystem. We know there's a ton of other providers that might not be doing the right thing. And so for the industry as a whole, we need to create these vehicles for the protection of businesses and individuals.
I'd argue that, for an enterprise buyer, while, traditional insurance doesn't exist, every time you sign a contract, you use a service, there are things like SLAs and indemnification and so on that are, a recourse for you if there is a loss.
We see it in healthcare. I think going into that with the BAA and contractual agreements, but I would say as a standard rule, it's not. But I think it's progressing to that space.
So I know that we have a few entrepreneurs and founders in the audience. I have a couple of questions for you on their behalf. So venture investment in security has blown up over the last several years, and that's resulted in an even greater number of security companies competing for the same budget, for the same mind share. And I know that you're an advisor in multiple companies, and obviously in your role you're a security buyer. What's your advice to an entrepreneur in terms of cutting through the noise? How do you look at a company when you're either deciding to take on an advisory role or, buy their product?
Yeah, wow, there's a lot in there. I think that we're in a security startup bubble. And it's using the B word is probably really inappropriate in a lot of ways. But and so if you're going to start a company or be a company, really focus on that differentiation. There's a lot of me toos that are out there. Focus on the segment that you're focusing in. I mean, there are certain companies that I've seen come out where there's no pivot into a SKU, into a greater product. You create an initial solution for something and hope to grow that into a platform or a multi-SKU solution to really accelerate growth. And in some of these, there's just no way to go from here other than possibly being acquired. So focusing on that is really important. Focusing on customer fit. I mean, these are nothing new. I mean, this is just the basic model, but in any time you get in an overhyped situation or a very media-centric situation, it's, no, I can sell this because it's, the security groups have I have no upward limit on my budget, which I've seen in a couple reports of couple companies. I think it's a little bit silly because eventually there is no more money that you can spend in a company. But having said that, it really gets back to the basics of building a product and service to differentiate and inject into the market. And I think that focusing on the relationships in the security space, whether you're doing that beta, that customer fit, your alphas, is very, very important, where security is still a very small industry. Which is one of the reasons why I really like it. It's very communal, it's very collaborative, collegial. You can weed out people who know what they're talking about and don't very, very easily, and there's a lot of support. And so when you really are injecting into the security market, it's more so by word of mouth than it is by direct sales, conversion rates on email campaigns, even conferences to a great degree. It's really about getting those first 10, 15 customers and really making them your zealots and your advocates into the space. Where I've seen a lot of people have huge budgets, blow it on massive campaigns in a year or two, and then you just don't see them anymore. Right. So I really think that as we go into maybe a slightly downward shift in the hype cycle in the security space over the next couple of years, those things are really going to be more important than ever before as that separation of vendors in the community start to play through.
So I'm a dummy in security, okay?
Don't say that.
And why should I not go for Drive, OneDrive, Box, Dropbox? Why should I choose for you guys? From a security point of view,
Mm-hmm.
what's the main
I think there's probably two things. Well, first and foremost, security is kind of like a tire. It needs to suit you. There's a lot of uses for peers in the market for individuals that have no need for massive security. So they have no need. They're putting public data on the net. They don't really need to possibly pay that premium. Where we really have a lot of our customers that are in highly regulated industry, financial services, healthcare, or others, that really see the value in what they have and really see a need to protect it, or whether they're compelled or they feel by their own volition to really drive to do that. And so to that point, we take two approaches to it. The first one is we really want to put our money where our mouth is. So roughly in industry, you have a 0.5% ratio of individuals to overall employees in the base. We're way, way high of that in the security. How many security practitioners versus overall employees? Two, we see security as something that we're trying to identify and solve our customer security problems, as opposed to, I just need to do this to inject in the market. And that's why you see some of the solutions come out, like we released Enterprise Key Management, which allows you to manage your own keys but not disrupt the overall service of the platform itself. Nobody's really done that before. Customers have asked, but it never really inhibited any deals. But what we're trying to do is push the market forward, push the industry forward, cloud industry, and really provide those upper echelon customers that really need that capability and want that capability to have it. And so that's just one example of how we're philosophically pushing the security within the company to provide the capabilities and services, where you might not necessarily see that in other companies because they're doing a cost differentiation. We want to be the Costco of X, or we are looking for a focus differentiation. We're not really focused on security as much, we're focused on something else. But for us, not only ease of use and user experience and being able to collaborate and share and exchange information, content, but also doing it in enterprise security, which is why we focus on the forward-looking security aspects.
Just building on that example that you just gave, providing the keys to the enterprise to manage.
Yeah.
How can you enable the maybe third-party applications that want to access my data in the cloud, which is encrypted by me, but I don't want to necessarily share my keys with them? How do I provide them access to that?
How do you provide third parties access to your content? So within the ECAM platform that we've created?
Right, so the data is encrypted, the keys
Right.
are with me, I'm not sharing them.
One of the most important capabilities and requirements to implement is, in anything that we do, is really to make it as transparent to the end user as possible. One of the biggest problem, if not the biggest problem that we've had in the security industry is we have security solutions being bolted on, and then the end user says, this is horrible. It's a horrible user experience. It's yet another bump. I'm leaving, and they go off to something else, to a much, much more insecure capability. So when we put in EKM, it was how do we allow our enterprise customers to manage their keys, yet be transparent to the end user when they're creating, sharing, and collaborating with a third party. So when you share it out and collaborate it with a third party, all of that exchange of keys is done in the background, completely transparent to both parties.
I think I'm getting the sign from Howard over there. So I wanted to say thank you, Justin, for your time, for your insight, and for those of you out there, check out somaini.net, somaini.net for Justin's blog, and www.box.com/trust for his work at Box. So,
thank you very much for having me.
Welcome, everybody. I think we can just go ahead and start talking if you guys can start to migrate back. So my name is Harold Yu. I'm one of the partners here at Oric. In case you don't know, this is a law firm, so you're sitting in a law firm office right now. We represent lots of technology companies. Typically, we start to work with them when they get formed, help them raise money, and then move them forward. So lots of companies, obviously, in the security space. Security is a very big topic, as we talked about earlier in the conversation that we just had. This is a terrific topic. This is a terrific area, and we have an outstanding panel. So thank you to the participants today. We'll go ahead and introduce ourselves, talk about a few topics, have a conversation among the panelists, but we'll also try to pause and allow each of you to ask questions as you have them throughout the conversation. So, anything else? Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So why don't we start just by having each of us introduce ourselves and just say who we are and where we are and what we're currently doing. So maybe Caleb, do you want to start?
All right. Caleb Sima, founder of a security company called Blue Box Security. We focus on making mobile apps trustable in untrustable environments.
And I'm Jim Hansen. I'm the Vice President of Product Management for a company called Alien Vault, also a security company. We provide an all-in-one solution for allowing customers to monitor their networks for network-borne threats and also endpoint-based threats as well.
And I'm Ken Elephant. I'm the Managing Director of the security sector at Intel Capital. We invest about $350 million a year in startups, everything from pre-revenue companies to late-stage companies. My little group invests about $30 million a year in security startups.
Hi, my name is Alistair Faulkner. I'm Chief Products Officer and one of the co-founders of a company called ThreatMetrics. ThreatMetrics helps you stop cyber criminals and not customers by leveraging global shared intelligence. So we help secure your customer accounts, we help protect your revenue from online fraud, and we do that in a way that's consistent across whether they're coming through a web browser or a mobile application.
Hi, I'm Mark Rogers, and I'm a security researcher and in charge of information security for Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a company that accelerates websites and protects them against denial of service attacks and layer 7 attacks.
Thank you, guys. I also want, before I forget, I wanted to mention that there's a gentleman here that should be here, Chad Lynch, whom a lot of you know, but a lot of you don't know as well. So if you don't know him, you should. He's the gentleman who puts together this panel and all of our series. So he will be the one at other future events with Lauren, so you should definitely try to meet him if you can. So why don't we start by, this is a really big area, obviously, and it's kind of hard to organize, frankly, and I think it would be helpful maybe to try to organize that with the help of the panel. So maybe we could start with maybe Ken, if you want to talk about a little bit about how you think about the security space, maybe from your perspective as an investor. You know, how do you organize this topic generally? What are the boxes you put everything into, and then kind of go from there?
Sure. Thanks. And by the way, thanks very much to Oric for setting this up. I think this is a great panel. It was great to hear your thoughts, Justin, as well before. So how many people in the audience went to RSA this year? Okay. this year was interesting. I've been going for about 10 years. As you know, it's been growing every year. There's a South Hall, there's a North Hall, there's now a West Hall, and it was packed. How many people that went to RSA were confused after they walked the booths? I was, okay, and I look at security companies every day. We at Intel Capital, we probably look at about 1,000 security companies per year and invest in about 4 of them. So there's a very high look to buy ratio. And if I were to segment the markets, I'd segment them logically in terms of how they're focused for the enterprise. So there's network security companies. That's definitely an up-and-coming market. There's mobile security companies, like what Caleb is doing, definitely another up-and-coming market. The security management space is, in and of itself, another interesting market, because how do you actually get all this information together and make sense of it? The cloud security market, certainly another up-and-coming space. The data center market, that has completely changed as well, going from traditional data centers with stovepipe servers to virtualized servers. Definitely another issue. So Internet of Things, brand new threat vector. So the way that I look at the spaces and break up the market is, where are the threat vectors coming from? And unfortunately, the attackers really only need to be successful once. And we, as defenders, we need to be successful as much as we can and prioritize the risks. So when I look at Internet of Things, just taking that as an example, to break that market down, there's 3 different parts of the Internet of Things market in my mind. There's the industrial side, so how do these attackers take down the utility companies? There's the home side, so how does an attacker actually break into my house now? He doesn't need to pick the locks. He can go and open my garage door opener with my app that I have on my phone. And he or she can do that in 3 different ways now. They can break into my 900 megahertz protocol, they can break into my app on my phone, or they can break into the router in the house. So there's a lot of different threat vectors to worry about.
You can also bust down the door.
We're getting to that, Caleb. So yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I don't want to.
And then, filling out the Internet of Things space, it's wearables. So now a bad guy could, if I have a pacemaker that's Internet enabled, there's bad things that can happen. So for each one of these spaces, there's probably at least 10 or 12 major subspaces, and there's other spaces as well. That's what makes investing in these companies so interesting, because you want to pick a company that has a good wedge, but can ultimately be a platform company.
Ken, thanks. That's really helpful. Mark, do you see this in the same way? How do you look at how do you organize the security world today?
I guess I look at it more in terms of emerging threats and the way the threat landscape's changing, because today the threat landscape moves faster than it ever has before. If you look back, say, 10 years ago, people were primarily attacking simple software implementations. There were some network attacks. Now, pretty much any interface is vulnerable. People are reprogramming ATMs with removable cards. People are attacking airplanes. And that means we, as a security company, have to stay on top of our game. We can't let any new attack catch us, blindside us. The excuse of it's a 0-day, therefore we can't be held responsible, is becoming weaker and weaker. So now somehow we have to try and stay ahead of the attackers who are already 2 steps ahead of us.
Got it. Alistair, what kind of keeps you thinking about? What worries you the most about in this landscape? What are you thinking about all the time?
So I think their security basically reflects a lot of the technologies that the way that technology evolves. So when we first put a computer on a desk, that was when the beginning of the antivirus industry. You connected those computers with wires or Wi-Fi, and that was the birth of network security. And then we realized, it's actually the data that's on that security that we need to protect. So, data center security, encryption, etc. And then, one of the themes, given that you brought it up about RSA last year, was that identity is a new perimeter of defense, that, we need to move further and further outside the firewall. And, we also look at it that way, that actually identity is not really a perimeter defense because there is no perimeter. So you can help secure your employees as best as possible, but your employees are customers of somebody else. So we're really taking the perspective of how do you operate an environment, right, where you have to assume that every device that's interacting with your services and every identity that interacts with your systems, whether it's that someone's logging onto your internal employee system, whether they're logging onto an online banking application, you have to assume that they are compromised. And if you take that environment, if you take that knowledge, and I guess the extreme of that is everybody in the security is saying, oh, well, throw up our hands, assume that we're compromised, let's focus on detecting and knowing that we're compromised. And that's good to a point, but where it completely fails is when you have to, the moment of truth, when there's an employee that needs to get something done, or there's a customer that's trying to work with you, or there's a patient that needs help done, or there's a doctor that needs to facilitate care. If those services aren't built in a way that it's real time, is able to do the interdiction piece, is able to stop something, then I think the current trend, which is investing a lot in anomaly detection and big data, et cetera, and I'm talking specifically in enterprise firewalls, will only get us so far. So that's kind of the way that we look at it. Assume everything is broken. Got it.
So, Caleb, maybe can you tell us a little bit about the current state of the mobile security landscape? What's current there?
I don't know. I need like 20 minutes. Can I do that?
I'll give you 2.
Right. So, mobile is interesting. Most people kind of look at mobile and there's in sort of the, can I protect what is inside the app and can I keep what is mine, right? A lot of people think of mobile as very personal. Like, what is my data? Can I make sure that I keep my data secure? Can I make sure people don't steal it or hack or steal? So malware, for example. There's a second part to mobile applications that I think a lot of people don't think about at all, so I'm going to bring up here, and this is my 2 minutes, which is that the web has shifted to mobile, and mobile is the new web. And if you guys remember, like even 5-10 years ago, everyone was attacking web applications. Even today, everybody attacks web applications. But no one realizes since mobile apps are the new web, people are starting to use mobile apps as the attack vector into the company. It's not just about, oh, am I keeping my private email private? You can actually start looking at mobile apps today that are facing these mobile API backends that are making the same mistakes web guys did 10 years ago. We're talking about dev, QA environments, live, open APIs, people doing stupid mistakes, arbitrary uploads of files, admin and debug menus held inside of personal apps today. So for example, a lot of the apps that you have on your phone right now, there are debug administrative hidden menus that point directly to the dev environments with no security or auth whatsoever on this back end. I just find it fascinating that you're seeing, and again, security is a cycle. So every time we're seeing this exact same cycle, same mistakes that web guys made 10 years ago are the same mistakes we're seeing being pushed out in mobile apps. They're looking at mobile apps as being a trusted part of their environment, and they're screwing it up. So there's some really cool stuff that you can kind of get into there, but that's where I'll leave off from now.
Yeah, well said. And Jim, what's your thought on just the kind of current threats that are most worrisome to you right now?
Yeah, I think as you take a look at, I think, Justin, you'd mentioned, I mean, the threat landscape is changing, right? And organizations continue to struggle with how to react to when the bad guys are figuring out how to probe and how to get into your network infrastructure. You know, for anybody who is required to protect their organization, you do have to think about things like mobile. You got to think about web. You can't forget about the perimeter. You can't forget about those preventative controls that you put in place. All of those things become relevant parts of how you secure the organization as a whole. Now, as you start to then take a look at what happens after something happens, now that becomes also a really difficult challenge for organizations to figure out. You got to start thinking about the behavior, the people. I think, Justin, you mentioned something about just the training involved in the personnel, right? What's the weakest link in any organization? Typically the person. How often, here in 2015, do machines get even patched and updated? Something that was a problem, 15 years ago? Every organization still struggles with that. So how do you ensure that all of these different controls are in place, and when they fail, and they will, how do you respond to it effectively? And there's a lot of tools out there to help, but at the end of the day, it requires a lot of diligence, it requires a lot of training, it requires a lot of expertise internally that organizations have to think about in order to make sure that they're putting in place the right policies, the right procedures, and at the end, the right response so that when it does happen, you have a way to be able to deal with the scenario. You look at, who was it that mentioned the Anthem issue, right? I was impacted by that as well. I got home and my wife said, "Oh my God, did you hear what happened today? All of our information." I said, "Well, yeah, it was inevitable. It was going to happen eventually." So the question is what do you do now, right? Well, we put our own controls in place as a family to protect our identities and our information. But I also expect that Anthem, I'm sure they're thinking real long and hard about what could they have done better. It's not that they don't spend a ton of money. It's not that they don't invest into security tools and applications and perimeter software and detection type capabilities, but they got impacted anyway. And it usually is just one small issue, whether it's on a mobile device, so a web app, or something else. So I think as you take a look at the overall just threat landscape in the industry. I mean, you think, Ken, you mentioned there's a ton of products out there. It's confusing. I went to RSA. I was amazed at just how many different kinds of solutions are out there. And yet you guys all have to sort of sit there and figure out what's relevant, what's not relevant, what's important. And it's a tough thing to do. But at the same time, I think, again, Justin, you mentioned they're basic controls that everybody still puts in place. Why? Because you have to.
And with all these products and all these companies out there, and with a ton in the market, the security market has obviously grown huge. Our hacks are getting worse. We're getting more frequency. We're seeing more of it. So does that mean we're just selling everyone stuff that doesn't work? Or what is the problem?
I think part of the problem is there are too many companies focusing on niche parts of the security problem. So there's lots of people coming up with very specific solutions to very specific problems, and very few companies looking across the board to say, this is how you make the whole picture secure. This is how you have a joined up view. Instead of having a box that only stops vulnerabilities that come in on x64, what about a box that stops vulnerabilities coming in on x64, mobile, Win32, Linux, all the other devices that may be sitting on a network? We need to start joining up rather than continuing to fragment.
Okay, great. Any questions on the threat landscape from the audience? Yeah.
In terms of I guess this is a couple of part question. In terms of national security threats, there's a lot of press about foreign governments coming to the United States and may have been responsible for a lot of the recent threats. On a scale of 1 to 10, like how certain are you that there will be a larger scale attack of that sort in the future? Foreign governments.
I guess that depends on what you mean by a larger scale attack. There have already been some pretty impressively large scale attacks. And if you consider, for example, Stuxnet. Stuxnet was a foreign government action, US government action, I'm British, against a foreign state that was incredibly effective in what it did. Conversely, if you accept the position that Sony was as a result of North Koreans, that was an unprecedented level of damage to a company as a cyber threat. Where do you go from there?
I just read a story before walking in here about Russia hacking into the White House email and how Obama and all the rest, and they had all these email of the non-confidential section, of course, of all the email, but how it was running for a long time. They were doing a lot of things in there. They got access to a lot of information. It happens pretty much, I think, on a constant basis. It's probably never an event. Even if it is that big event, it's the question of whether you hear about it or not, right? That's another question.
I think if you think about war or just battles that happen between countries, not much has changed in the last several hundred years. The battlefront has changed, right? And if you think about it, 40, 50 years ago, what did you do? You fly some planes over the enemy territory, you drop some bombs on critical infrastructure. Why? Because it knocks them out. Now there just happens to be a connected way to go do that. right? And I think that landscape is important to keep in mind because it's happening every day. We do it to them, they do it to us, and I think that's just a fact. And there will, at some point, come a point where a nation state of some kind is going to leverage that to their advantage. I mean, even look at something simple like the NSA putting malware into hardware components that were sent out into other countries. I mean, that's a brilliant, actually, good idea. But they got caught, right? Now they have to deal with the ramifications of it. But, I mean, what an incredible way to just shut everything off if they wanted to. I think it's incredible as you start to take a look at both the wartime aspect of this as it relates to security. It's less of a security problem at that point, but it's entirely a security problem because the security of the systems and the applications and the places where all that critical infrastructure resides, it is actually reasonably vulnerable, which means if somebody does want to go shut it down with something like a Stuxnet or some other sophisticated attack that nobody knows about yet, they'll figure it out. And then it's just a function of, again, how do you react to it?
I think something that's a little bit unusual is this is the first time where actually cyber criminals are probably ahead of nation states, because if you look at most of these attacks, the things that came out from the NSA, cyber criminals are already doing this. Cyber criminals have been infecting supply chain, as an example, for a decade now. So for once, the criminals are ahead, and the nation states are kind of trailing and copying.
Yeah, I'd totally echo that. There's a couple of things going on. You talked about, nation states. I mean, what we are going through right now is like the warm Cold War, where you are spying is to the next level. And it makes perfect sense. If you were a nation state, what would you do? Well, you would collect a dossier on everybody and anything that had potential access, one that you could turn, so you could use as an insider threat. It's actually very, very common, which most people don't appreciate. Things like medical records and other types of things can have a play there. The other aspect on the cyber criminal side is that there are now unprecedented ways of monetizing that identity data. And much of it is happening all the time. You're just not exposed to it. And that leads to other types of issues, which is, why not? Well, if you have a data breach of a certain size, then there's some compulsion to at least report that or disclose. And depending on what jurisdiction you're in, what state, of what country. Whereas we know it's happening, it's just not visible, it's going below the surface. The other aspect, I think, was what you're hinting at also is, when is what's been called for a long time, like the digital Pearl Harbor? Like, when is it that we move from, and I think the hacks that we're seeing that are destructive, so you're seeing the FFIEC, the US government saying, it put out a joint statement saying, hey, you need to be, as part of your banking controls, given you are part of the critical infrastructure, you need to be prepared against two things. One is the unprecedented levels of bots and stolen identities, either through malwares or breaches that are being used every day. And the second thing is you need to protect yourself against these destructive malware attacks. And there is actually precedent where in, I think it was South Korea, where in fact, a part of the core banking system of the banks were manipulated. So, what happens in the financial system when you can no longer trust a trade, and if you don't know it's fictitious? So it's wide, but to answer your question, I think it's 10 because it's already happening.
Yes.
I have a question. So when you think about the threat landscape, I'll sort of use three words. One is reactive, and proactive, and predictive. So what are your views in terms of where are we from an industry perspective? Are we still most of the time spending our time in a reactive state, or are we starting to see a move towards being maybe proactive or predictive? What do you anticipate going on there?
I would say right now we're about 80% reactive, and there is an emerging 20% or so which is proactive, which is there's a lot of new predictive analytics that are coming down the line, which are largely unproven but show a lot of promise. But the bulk of stuff is very much reactive. We find out about new ways that cyber criminals are exploiting infrastructure almost every day, and we're spending a lot of time analyzing how they're doing it, let alone working out how we can then prevent it.
Yeah, what I'm seeing at the major banks is every major bank now has a red team and a blue team. So there is one team that is there that's just said, go attack this system. And so they are trying to be proactive in terms of understanding where they are really vulnerable, other than, you know, their core systems that they get vulnerability data from, like a Qualys and so on. So that's a good sign. But I completely agree. I think we're, you know, 80 to 90% reactive these days, and we do need to be more proactive. We need to be better than what the cyber criminals are doing against our own personal infrastructure, let alone for the entire market.
You look at our number one line of defense against malware, it's still antivirus. Antivirus is 100% dependent on signatures. Signatures are dependent on you having been exposed to the malware before to analyze it to create those signatures. It's reactive by its very nature.
Yes, one more question. Yeah.
I think we actually kind of do that.
We
you know,
do it-
we do. A lot of these guys make more money working for security companies now, and pen testing and bug hunting and doing the rest. There's a ton of these guys that I think make just, well, let me not say it, not more, but they make a good amount of money without having to watch their backs. So there actually are some good programs. A lot of these guys, a lot of the top guys I know who used to be somewhat shady are actually now doing things for legitimate purposes. So,
but we do it very badly. I mean, I am an ex-Black Hat hacker. I'm also the head of security for a conference called DEF CON, which is the world's largest hackers conference. I've been in the industry and the community for 20 years, and it has improved. I see members of my community actively being sought out and recruited, but there is still a stigma. And the reason I'm here in the US rather than the UK is because the stigma is such that I couldn't get any kind of serious job in the UK with my background. Whereas in the US I can, because I've got no criminal record.
Out of curiosity, so how do you get trusted now?
I'm trusted because I've proven to be trusted. I've never been arrested or prosecuted for doing anything. I operated in that world, and I've done a lot to solve problems since. I've earned that reputation. But the problem is there are parts of the world, including my home country, I can go to, where no matter what I do, I will not be trusted. And there are a lot of incredibly bright kids who could be turned towards this problem who aren't being. We've only recently started to see some big companies and the US, some parts of the US government come to DEF CON to try and recruit hackers to solve some of these problems. It's baby steps, but it needs to be bigger because there's an incredibly bright workforce out there that wants to solve these problems.
Okay, so why don't we turn back here to a little bit more conversation. On the next topic, given this kind of threat landscape, what about opportunities? Maybe each of you can speak a little bit about what your respective companies are focused on, what opportunities you're really focused on, and why. Any thoughts there, Mark? I mean, what in terms of what specifically you're trying to attack? What are you trying to solve for right now?
Probably the biggest problem I'm trying to solve for right now is Cloudflare proxies approximately 5% of the internet's web requests, which, if you think about that in terms of a number, is a lot of requests. And in that, we have a small percentage which are always bad. We protect our customers on average from about, I think it's roughly 2 billion attacks a day. How can I be better at doing that to filter out? Because at the moment, the tools that we use to filter out the bots are crude, and they harm user experience. Yet we're moving into a world where security and user experience are now inseparable. People don't stick with security measures that are clunky or hard to use. A great example is if you look at the Touch ID on the iPhone. Before Touch ID came along, less than 50% of people had a 4-digit PIN on their phone. Why? Because it was too much of a pain to enter 4 digits. As soon as Apple came along with Touch ID, that uptake went to around 80%. So security has to be usable. That's probably one of my biggest challenges. The second biggest challenge is the bad guys are getting better at what they do. They're moving from just kids throwing a tantrum with big denial of service attacks to sophisticated layer 7 attacks where they try to understand the stack that the customer they're targeting uses and try to work out how they can make requests that will cripple that. How can I get ahead of that? How can I get 2 steps ahead of them?
It's great perspective. Yeah, Cloudflare is a fantastic company. I mean, it's just amazing what you've been able to do in terms of helping your average Joe Blow and others much larger who just do not have the sophistication and wherewithal to be able to screen from such sophisticated attacks. So something that's severely needed. From our perspective, ThreatMetrix, the way that we see part of our world, which is helping to secure your online accounts, your revenue from online fraud, and also your perimeter from malware attacks and others. But we really think the key to the solution is using shared intelligence. So it's very analogous to spam detection. And if you can think about ThreatMetrix, it's a more sophisticated spam detector, except spam, it's not trying to figure out, is this a good or bad email? It's trying to figure out, is this person who's online accessing your online bank account the person who actually owns those legitimate credentials? Is the person who's doing, or this bot or machine that's trying to do this online credit card transaction, is it the legitimate owner or not? And how we do that, similar to how spam got solved, like we don't all sit there, we get an occasional spam email, but for the most sake, we've done a good job. And the only way they got there was by using shared intelligence or reputation, by saying, look, if we see spam coming from one IP address or from one server, and one person detects it spam, and a few people start detecting it spam, then pretty much we don't have to look at the keywords, we just know that it's spam from where it came from. And it's a similar analogy is, how do you share intelligence in real time so you can flip the equation on the attackers? Right now, I think it was brought up before, was to say, there's an asymmetry that exists, which is attackers can collaborate and attack from anywhere at any time, whereas you, standing alone, have to defend it from all places at all times. So the only way that you can change that is by having the same real-time shared intelligence across all organizations. So that's easier said than done. So we have what's called a digital identity network, where we say, you know what, we think security can be effective. It can be customer-friendly in that it could be the user does not need to get involved, because the moment you get the user involved, the lower your chances of compliance and success are. But if we can do that in real time, that can protect people in a way that secures their privacy, then I think that's going to be one of the ways that we can make a dent on the problem.
And from my perspective, I think the huge opportunity is really around security from the cloud. And we have some examples up here on the stage. It really dovetails into exactly what you guys were saying. We were investors in this company called Prolexic, which started off doing distributed denial of service from the cloud. And what I mean by that is that when Bank of America was hit by a DDoS attack, they flip a switch, and then all the traffic would go to the Prolexic scrubbing centers. So they started off in DDoS. It now got acquired by Akamai. And there's no reason why they can't do web application firewall from the cloud. You can imagine IPS happening from the cloud in the future. This really is the way that I think security is going to be solved.
You just described Cloudflare.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And, well, it's both of what you said, because what you're doing is you're putting shared intelligence in the cloud, and you're leveraging it. And the way that it fits with Alien Vault, which, by the way, we're investors in, is that every little company connects to big companies. So the way that Target was hacked was through a little HVAC vendor. Unfortunately, Target had some good perimeter systems, but it's the little guys, all the 1,000 little companies that Target was connected to in the cloud, through the cloud, that was the big problem.
Mm-hmm. So in fact, we just dismantled a phishing attack that exactly mirrors that. First sign of it we got were phishing emails starting to hit our customers. So we analyzed it, and what we worked out was these phishing emails were all coming from WordPress sites. And we took it back, and we found clusters of compromised WordPress sites. And as we explored it and dug into it a bit, we actually ended up finding a WordPress ODE, a vulnerability that had never been disclosed before. We traced that and found another cluster of sites in Russia. And instead of the traditional blocking of a phishing attack by blocking the emails, which is how normally they get stopped, we were able to attack from 2 directions. We blocked the phishing emails, but we also went round and handheld the ISPs in taking down all the compromised WordPress sites, so the phishers were no longer able to either send emails or capture credentials if anyone did happen to get an email. And I couldn't agree more. It's the little guys that are becoming the most important part, because they are the soft underbelly of the internet.
Yep. And then just to close it before I pass to you, Jim, I mean, what Justin was talking about before is data to the cloud. So if I'm working at Intel and I'm working on our new chip, and I want to share it with my colleagues, why not put in Box? We were investors in Box and so on. But you want to make sure that it's completely safe. You don't want someone from China or Russia stealing that design, or me, if I'm a bad guy, selling it to my buddy in China. So doing that security to the cloud is equally as important as from the cloud. So I'm seeing a resurgence in kind of next generation data leak prevention for sure because of the cloud.
Yeah, I think as you think about even the cloud as an example, there's that notion of securing data to the cloud. There's also a notion of securing the cloud itself. Typically not in the way that one would if say, they were leveraging a SaaS provider of some kind, but more if you look at how people are using SaaS or service providers like Amazon or Rackspace or others. You take your systems, you put your systems into the cloud. And in Amazon, as an example, there's a shared security model where effectively Amazon controls the hypervisor down, but you're responsible for everything else up. And as it turns out, when you start looking at a lot of the basic security controls like vulnerability assessment or network IDS, well, Amazon doesn't really like you running those things inside of their network. In fact, they don't let you. So how do you start to get visibility into traffic or what's happening with even something simple like your Amazon accounts? Now, one of the things that we've done at Alien Vault is we've taken a very holistic approach around looking at what a typical company just needs to do. And we do focus very heavily on the small, medium-sized company. As you mentioned, the small company that ended up impacting Target. Well, there are millions of these companies out there, most of which are highly insecure and don't have even some of those basic sets of technologies. So if you look at the fundamental issue that a lot of these companies face, they have maybe one security guy. In a lot of cases, they have a security guy who's an IT guy who happens to be the office manager and who also happens to be the HR manager for the company that they work for. How much time do you expect somebody like that to monitor for security? Not that much. In fact, you're lucky if you get them to spend 20 to 30 minutes per day looking at the security of their infrastructure. So now these companies become connected to other companies, which become connected to other companies. And now what you have is an entire ecosystem of organizations that are ultimately insecure in such a way that it impacts their partners and vendors that they actually work with. Right? So what Alien Vault has done is we've taken and brought together a lot of those basic sets of security controls, vulnerability assessment, network IDS, host-based IDS, both for on-premise environment. So if I've got my stuff sitting in a back room or if I have it sitting in a data center, I can monitor all of the network traffic that comes to and from all systems within my infrastructure. And then secondly, anything that's connected to the cloud, I also then have the ability to start putting things into the cloud that allows me to do some of that front-end monitoring for things like Amazon and so forth, right? Now, when you start to take a look at all of those different capabilities that are built together, you then give it to somebody who has little knowledge or experience of security, and what do you get? You still get somebody who doesn't know security. And so that's where really our product is designed to be super simple, super easy to use. And at the same time, we also have something called Open Threat Exchange. It's actually very similar to what Alistair mentioned about threat metrics, excuse me. And what we've done is we basically have an open, collaborative threat intelligence sharing platform where people can get in there. They can take a look at all of that information that we've collected from anywhere from about 2 to 300 million malware samples per day. We just piece them apart, figure out how they talk, how they go out and they communicate, and that allows us then to take that threat intelligence, bring it down into the platform, and help organizations find some of that activity. Now, it's not preventative, right? It's already happened. If you have something communicating inbound, outbound, either via Poodle or Heartbleed, for those of you who've heard of those really big threats that happened last year, those are the kind of things that find their way into your environment. So how do you solve for it? How do you know that they're there? Well, for the guy who doesn't have a lot of security expertise, we basically hand that security expertise to them. My labs team is actually comprised of several guys who used to be just like Mark over here. And we've given them jobs. Why? Because they're really damn good at understanding threats, decomposing those threats, and turning that into something useful. Sorry?
You're paying them really well.
We are actually paying them exceedingly well, yes. I should probably go get a job, but I'm not good enough for it. So anyway, so the key thing is ultimately just bringing all that information together, giving them something simple and easy to use so they get visibility into what's going on. And that at least is that barrier to entry. I mean, earlier you mentioned that notion of compliance as the barrier. It really is a barrier to get accreditation for your compliance regulation, but the barrier is much higher. If you want to be secure in any capacity whatsoever, you've got to take it much, much higher than that.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so unlike these guys are all up here in the cloud. I'm actually on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is that you as consumers or employees of your company need to be able to access the data that this great cloud gives you. And so how do you do that in the appropriate way? So I'm on the mobile endpoint. And so for me, the way that I look at it is mobile is the new gateway when you're looking at these companies and what they offer, whether you're an employee accessing your company's internal resources or whether you're a consumer doing business with your bank. At the end of the day, the mobile app is going to be the way that you do it. And these apps are going everywhere, right? It's not just your phone, your tablet, it's now your watch, it's going to be your car, it's going to be IoT. These are becoming the gateways. And unlike other companies, other security companies that really kind of focus on how do I control devices or how do I lock down these devices and look for malware, look for what's bad, well, we kind of looked at this approach and said it's completely wrong. We know that more and more devices are going to come out and that these apps are going to go on more and more of these things. And you don't know what the environment is, you don't know what the device is, and you can't trust it. You have to assume that the phone let's say I'm a bank, when you as a consumer bank with me, I have to assume that the app that you have on your device has malware on it. I have to assume it's already been attacked. I have to assume it's unsafe. How then do I, as a bank, when I deliver that app to you, ensure trust between you, the consumer, and me, that bank, even on an untrusted device that is probably already compromised? And so what Blue Box does and what we focus on is taking that type of technology and bring it to these companies who build mobile apps so that they can get that both from their employees and their consumers.
Got it. That's great. Very helpful. Just to extend, we're running out of time, but just to extend on a topic that Justin discussed, since a lot of the audience is very early stage focused, what's the advice that you have for people trying to start companies in this space? Obviously, there's a lot of money now that's being put into this area. A lot of you have started companies, and Ken, you're investing in these. What would you tell an entrepreneur that's about to or is considering very strongly trying to start a company in security right now? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot, but we definitely need like drinks, like 8 hours. Like I've started, this is my second company I've started, my third that I've been running. There is a lot in terms of starting a security company. I don't even know where to start, but I would say a couple things. If you're thinking about starting a security company, you have to look at the real threat, the real problem. And I think this actually probably applies to any business, not just a security company, but look at what the issue is, start small, solve a problem, and do it really, really well. Don't go too big, don't go too giant. Don't try to solve the world's security issues in your startup. Don't try to solve the Enterprise 500 problem in your startup. Focus on small things, get it right, do it well, and build off that core. Best advice you can possibly and lots of different companies, lots of different things that I've done as a startup entrepreneur in this business, very key things are doing that. And of course, like a 50 million other things, but that's one good advice.
Yeah, well said.
Ken, I'll pass it to you.
From my perspective, the absolute most important thing that entrepreneurs should think about and spend their time figuring out is product market fit. And I know that it sounds very simple to say, and it's pretty easy to go into a conference room and convince yourself that you actually do have product market fit. But you don't have product market fit until you actually have a product that a customer is really willing to open his or her wallet for. So that, I think, first and foremost is the most important thing. The second thing that I'd say is, what is the one thing that you can do as a company to have whoever you're presenting to have it be a compelling reason to buy today? So if you're presenting to an investor, what is the key thing that the investor will want to do to stop the other 10 things that he or she's working on to invest in your company today? Sometimes it's as easy as getting a board member from a company in a related space who's looked at 1,000 companies like yours, but is willing to invest his or her time and or hopefully money. Maybe it's like what Justin was saying before, getting those first 3 marquee customers, which are going to be the linchpins to get your next 100 customers. But what I find is the best entrepreneurs figure that out. The ones that don't figure that out are kind of chasing their tails for a long time. And so I would try and figure that out, and there's no one size fits all.
I'd say, kind of building on that as well, is know your place in the ecosystem. So if you're solving a problem, understand who else is solving the same problem. And if there are a ton of people solving that same problem, ask yourself, are you genuinely building a better mousetrap? Also look at how your product fits in with the other products in the ecosystem. Companies are moving out of the space where they want to buy another piece of tin to put in their network. If you're creating something that's separate and unique, you have to have a really compelling argument why it should be separate. And if there is no compelling argument for it to be separate, look at how it can be integrated into other products to enhance them and solve problems that perhaps they couldn't solve.
You want to get very lucky to begin with. You want to make sure, even if you have the right product, the timing is everything, honestly. I think where that's the market fit comes in. You have the right product, maybe, but the market just doesn't know about it, or just not enough people know about it. The other one is, and you know, I'm definitely not a good example. I'm a second company, but I always bite off way more than I can chew. So it's like, oh, okay. But it was understanding a core insight about the problem at hand. And so I was always more fascinated about the problem than what it was that I was building to address that problem. And so I just, you know, I step back and I just go, okay, there has to be, so this is the way, this is just my approach, but you definitely don't recommend it in all cases for sure. But I just went, okay, there, and I'm sure very similar to these guys. Look, we know that there is this specific problem. It has to be solved in a certain way. And our insight was, you know what, there's bots. And this is really how it kind of, it's just a very quick overview. We knew that everybody here knew 10 years ago that pretty much every single corporation's network was porous. Why? Because we were looking at the spam, and we knew that the spam was coming from that bank and that e-commerce site, and we knew malware was talking. We knew it, right? So our particular insight was, well, these compromised computers would be used for something else other than just sending spam, which was the exploit of the day, right? And it was, okay, so what happens if you have these computers which enable you to appear like you're from anywhere? You're probably going to use it for more and more valuable things over time. Okay, it probably means you're going to use it to try and access an online bank as opposed, or do an online credit card transaction as opposed to just trying to do a billion emails. So that was really it, and just saying, well, probably if that's the case, this problem's going to get worse. And then probably what's one or good ways that you can solve that problem. And the analogy was, well, how do we solve things with spam? And we knew it needed to be shared. So that was just have a really good insight and just hope your timing is right and just stick with it.
And have a bottle of vodka with you. Starting a company's hard.
Great. Other questions? Yeah.
The biggest crime I see is too many companies believe that security is something that can be solved with a checklist. You can get all the accreditation you like, you can get all the certifications you like, but if you don't take security into your culture and adopt it at every level of the organization, from the very bottom to the very top, then you're not really doing yourself a good service.
Asset management. Like, most people don't even know how many computers or laptops or anything. It's amazing in this day and age that they don't even know that. And just authentication and access control. Like, I think these are the fundamentals that have been around for forever, and no one seems to still somehow get that.
I think you could probably sum all of that up to the fundamentals. Everything from asset management, patch management, all the basic things, the basic security hygiene that you should have, very few people do.
From my perspective, absolutely, it's patch management. I mean, that should solve 85% of the problems that are out there, and it's amazing. 85% of the companies don't do it and don't do it well. And then secondly, on your important systems, doing two factors, not meaning that two factors of me, but for me to get sign off by somebody else. So if Edward Snowden wants to get access to a particular set of data, then Sally, who's his superior, needs to sign off on it. Those would be the two things that I would do for only the most important assets.
Great. Yes.
More of a business question. I'm just curious how sticky your businesses are. It sounds like we're pretty sticky, but do you guys know your renewal rates? Is security just one of those things that once you're in, you're set for life?
So I'll answer that without going into detail on numbers, but I can tell you that at least in the mid market, it's sticky. I mean, there's a ton of companies that need a lot of the solutions that are up here on this panel, including ours. My renewal rates are beyond what you would typically see with most software companies. But we also focus very heavily on making sure that we continue to innovate and deliver the need that our customers express to us, which is critical. If you don't continue to deliver the need, they will go find something else, and that's a given. So you have to continue to innovate, continue to push the boundaries of what you're there to help them do, which is ultimately protect their company.
Yeah, my sense on that is it's very sticky, but it's also very easy to get sideswiped. So look at Palo Alto Networks as an example. When they first came out, they went to enterprises, and these enterprises had checkpoint firewalls. And they said, just use our kind of next generation firewall because we can do user-based context, we can do app context, and so on. Just put our stuff behind checkpoint. And so they were successful, they got implemented. And then the CISO and each of these groups were like, well, why do I need this checkpoint in front of you? And then that's how they really started to sideswipe the entire firewall market. So it's sticky, but very easy to sideswipe competitors.
Yes, final question.
So we didn't talk about BYOD and how, what the percentage of threats or breaches happen with people bringing in their own devices and taking their devices home with them and leaving them in cabs, etc. So maybe you could speak to that. But what I'm really interested in, because Anthem's breach was they went in and accessed the data, and Anthem's excuse was, well, we encrypt data when it's being moved, but we can't encrypt it internally because that prevents our employees from easily accessing the data to aggregate it, to see trends, to share it, whatever. Is there a way to have your cake and eat it too with that data? Is there a way to protect that data but still be able to access it, aggregate it, etc.?
Yes, but it's not easy. If you consider they had a giant database full of data, the most secure way to deal with that would be to encrypt each record with its own individual key. But at that point, you're creating a management nightmare trying to deal with that. Alternative is you encrypt the entire database with a single key, but that key has to be around for applications to access it. So I think it can be designed in. The single key per record is the right approach, but you have to really think about the architecture as you build it. And you have to remember most of these organizations are coming from a space where this wasn't believed to be necessary. So they're playing catch up.
Oh yeah, the health CIOs were very clear a few years ago that data security was not a priority for them.
Yeah.
Data security is the ideal. Everyone wants data security. At the end of the day, being able to secure data at the data level is the right answer. There's no question. The problem is getting there is almost impossible. The data security works well in a closed ecosystem, right? If you use the same client that I use that he uses, and we only exchange data between us, and we don't want to use it anywhere else or share it with anybody else, data security is easy, right? It's very simple. But now or I use Box, for example. but example, Box is a closed ecosystem, right? You have to have Box in order to be able to use. And then the question is, well, what about searching capability? Can I search the documents? If it's encrypted, does Box have the key? Or does that make it secure? Or if he doesn't have Box and I want to share documents with him, but he doesn't want to use Box, then what happens? Right? And all of a sudden, the problem is you have to be in data security to work. You have to be the person who controls data going out, and you have to be in controls of the person receiving the data. And that is almost impossible.
On the BYOD question, at the moment, I think the only BYOD threats are kind of contamination threats. There are consumers who are getting infected with malware. They're bringing that malware into their enterprise, and it's causing issues. Enterprise malware that specifically uses BYOD devices to target malware, to target enterprises, I think it's starting to happen, but it's only emerging. There isn't a large number. Caleb may know some more on that.
I'm going to tell you guys, because I've been holding this back for such a long time, and I know this is how the attack is going to happen. I'm just going to tell it to you guys, so hopefully you guys can, because I know this is going to happen. Most people think malware is, oh, what I do is I download some shady mobile app, and then I run it, and then it breaks and does some things. And they think, oh, but isn't Apple secure? So if Apple's secure, then I don't have to worry about this. So I'm going to give you, this is my prediction on the biggest mobile attack that's going to happen. I'm going to lay out my prediction right here. Let's see if I'm right or not. But here's how it's going to happen. One, Apple's not secure. We all know this. Just to give you a stat, this year, there were 24 vulnerabilities that were patched out of 96 total, just from starting this year. 24 of them were what's called breakout of sandbox vulnerabilities. This means I click on a link in your Safari, and it breaks out of the app and is able to access other apps' data. Remember, it's not jailbreak. There's a difference between root access and system access, right? This is just breakout of sandbox. Here's what's going to happen, and I have a couple of these myself. Inside of Blue Box, we have a couple of these. Everybody does. So what I would do, if I were an attacker and I wanted to access and I wanted to do a big mobile breach, I wouldn't create an app that could break out of a sandbox and put it in the App Store. What I would do is I would go to the top 50 apps that are in the App Store today. I would target them. I would hack them. I would backdoor their Xcode build box with my malicious code that contains my breakout of sandbox. Very easy to do. By the way, there is a Xcode backdoor in the wild circulating out right now, because out of the top, just look at the top 20. Look in your App Store apps on Apple. Look at the top 20. There are all these small gaming companies, 15, 40-person companies. They're not enterprise security, don't have any security whatsoever. I would target these guys, go in their backdoor build box, put in my little code so that they wouldn't know. They would compile their next release of their app. They would upload it to the App Store. I would have free distribution immediately. I could just take 10 of these guys, and I would be on millions of devices in a matter of weeks.
That's such a hard way of doing it. There are much easier ways.
There are easier ways, too.
So I would just take out an advert. Or you can run on the screen every one of those 50 apps, and then load the malware through the advert.
Depending on, well, I mean, I don't want to get technical with you, but we should probably hold that back on this thing. But yes, there's also malvertising methods that are also easy to be able to do, depending on what gets loaded in that malvertising. But yeah, there's so many great ways to attack mobile, and I kind of wonder if we just haven't caught it yet, right? Because it's just so easy and like ignorant. Like someone's got to have done this already, right? Is my thinking perspective behind this. That we just haven't caught them yet. But there's just so many different ways of breaking out. And by the way, just to give you one factor, I just want to give you one thing. You guys, how many of you guys use Gmail? Use the Gmail application? Yep. Okay, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to raise my hand. Just to give you an example, if I had one app, if I could just break out your sandbox, the Gmail app today keeps all of its email unencrypted in a SQLite database on the disk in your iOS device, fully patched. Even if you log out of your Gmail account, delete it, log out, all the email's still there. So all it takes is one app to go and reach that SQLite database, and then they get all of your email, by the way, and your state that's used for your login, which, by the way, never gets eliminated, even when you log yourself out of your Gmail app.
Isn't that the same with all the Google apps?
No, not at all. On the web, when you log out, you log out.
So the next thing is, do the criminals recognize the value of BYOD devices? And the answer is yes. A stolen iPhone with no data on it in UK will sell for about $400 to $600 approximately, depending on the device and the condition. The same device with corporate data on it will sell for anywhere up to $1,000 because criminals recognize that that data can be monetized.
All of a sudden, I don't feel so good. So I think that's it in terms of time. So why don't we give our panel a hand, and if you guys have some time to stay. Thanks, you guys.